What's up, everybody? It's the Action Figure Grader, also known as John, coming back to you with another video. And I just received in my email box, not snail mail, but email, the August newsletter from the Action Figure Authority in September. So they're clearly so busy that they can't even get their newsletter out on time. But anywho, I thought that there were some interesting tidbits of information in there. Some of it's repeat that I've already shared in separate videos and other videos on my channel. But there is some interesting information. The most notable information is that they are no longer going to be giving the uncirculated designation to loose Star Wars figures that are submitted still on the blister card. And so I talked about that in a couple of videos, but namely, if you look up in my channel, the uncirculated grade discussion. But, you know, people who have vintage Star Wars figures that are on really, really rough cards, where the cards are bent up, but they're still on the bubble, and there's no cracks in the bubble that allow for the figure to be taken out, you can submit that to AFA, or at least you could in the past, and say, hey, I want to grade this loose, and then they would return. And for example, let's say I did that with a Jawa that was on a bad card and really rough card, but it was still in the bubble. They would submit it back, or they would return it back to you with a U grade on it, like this one. This one's a U85 plus, no COO, which is what those two dashes mean. Jawa, small hood, dark stitch. So this came back as a U85. So whoever submitted this, I bought this on eBay, but whoever submitted this for grading submitted that Jawa because it had a bad, really rough, bent up card or whatever, holes in the card, whatever. And so it came back as a U85. Well, they're no longer going to be offering that as of the end of this month, as the end of September 2018. So I thought that was kind of interesting information on a couple of points. First, if you have any figures that are on a rough card and you are dead set on having a uncirculated designation, this month will be the last month that AFA is doing that. And I talked about this in another video, but the AFA submitted a couple of surveys to members like me, and they asked specifically, should we get rid of the uncirculated designation for loose action figures? And I guess enough people responded no, that they've decided to take it away. So it'll be interesting to see how the resale market for U-graded loose vintage figures will be affected, given that there's not going to be any more loose U-graded figures. Will the ones that are still available, you know, in a resale market like these, all of these are U-graded, uncirculated designation, will those go up in value? And I don't know the answer to that. Typically, uncirculated figures, especially rare ones like my dark brown-haired Luke, you know, typically those tend to go for quite a bit more than if they are not uncirculated. I don't know how that's going to affect even just more common figures such as my Hoth Stormtrooper or the Darth Vader. I don't know the answer to that, but it'll be interesting to see how prices are affected. I tend to track prices pretty closely, just because I like to see where things are going, or if I've got my eye on a figure, a specific figure that I'm trying to find, and I don't have the money for it. I like to see what they sell for, things like that. And you know, obviously prices change with economic times. You know, back in 08, 09, when we had the big global recession, prices dropped through the floor. I mean, I think prices got cut basically in half. But now that the economy, at least in the U.S., is really strong right now, prices have skyrocketed again to even levels that were well above the 08, 09 levels. Part of that's the economy. Part of that is all the new Star Wars movies that have come out since then. But and people are getting back into the collecting of vintage Star Wars figures. But, you know, how will, you know, a U-graded figure like this Vader, this is a raised bar COO, no COO, U85 plus, you know, how will that be affected versus a regular 85 of the exact same figure? I don't know. Because, you know, since there's not going to be any new supply coming on the market, since AFA is no longer offering the U-grade, it'll be interesting to see. So that's one bit of information. And like I said previously, briefly, if you do have any figures that are on very rough cards and you're thinking about submitting them to the AFA for the U designation, now's the time to do it, because as of the end of September 2018, that's no longer going to be an option for you. There's a lot of collectors out there that only collect uncirculated figures for whatever reason. They think it's kind of like a prestige type of designation on the sticker, since it's only been handled by the grading companies since they took the figure out of the blister on a rough card and put it in the case. And they liked having that kind of prestige associated with it. Me, I think I don't know, I think it's kind of overkill to worry about that kind of stuff. An 85 versus a U85, you know, there's not really much difference in my opinion. 85 plus versus a U85, I'd rather have the 85 plus, even though the 85 is uncirculated. But that's just my personal opinion. Some other tidbits of information from this newsletter. They are now guaranteeing turnaround times on all of their service levels except for their the longest service level, which is called the standard service level. Those are typically a turnaround time of about 3 months, but the archival, which is their fastest turnaround time, I think it's like 7 or 10 days. The premium, which is 15 to 20 days, and then the express, which is 30 days. If you submit any figures under those tiers, they are now guaranteeing those turnaround times, whereas before, you know, it might be plus or minus a week or 2 weeks. All of mine, I submit all of mine, just as a side note, I submit all of mine just under the standard grading time period because it's a lot cheaper. You know, the difference between, like, say, their highest level versus their cheapest level is it's like 300% difference. You're paying 3 times the amount. And so it makes sense for, like, a really, really valuable figure, like a vinyl Cape Jawa or something where you don't want to have it handled or sitting around too long. But most of these, you know, other than maybe the brown-haired Luke, most of these are not that expensive figures. So just submitting figures under the standard scale to me, especially like by Black Series figures in the background, you know, they're not particularly valuable figures anyway. So to submit those under anything other than the standard turnaround time, I don't really care. But, you know, if you got a very, very valuable figure, I can understand why they'd like to have that guaranteed turnaround time. So that's kind of nice. They also said that if they do not meet the turnaround time that's explicitly stated, then they will give you a credit for the difference. So let's say you submit it under the archival, which is the very, very highest tier, and they're late and they don't get it back until the premium level. Well, whatever the cost difference is, they're going to give you a credit for that. So that's kind of nice they do that. They also, let's see, the other thing that they did note, which I talked about previously before, if you are a member, you know, they have platinum, gold, and silver level memberships, and you got to pay an annual membership each year for that. The silver is $100, the gold is $200, the platinum, I believe, is $300 a year. But if you're a platinum member, you get 20% off everything, not shipping, but everything for grading wise. You get a 15% discount on gold and a 10% discount on silver. So, you know, that does add up to some pretty significant savings. I tend to submit my figures, especially modern figures, in bulk, you know, 10 to 15 or 20 figures. And, you know, a 20%, and I'm a gold level member, so a 15% discount on that, you know, that'll save me some money, you know, 50 to 75 bucks, I'd say, depending on how many figures I'm submitting. They also did note that they are going to be making some improvements to their population report database. And we've talked about that in the past, but, you know, for some of these figures, you can look up how many others of them are like that. And so, for example, this brown-haired Luke, as of now, is the only U85 loose brown-haired Luke. And they're going to be making changes so you have a lot more detail in terms of when the other ones were graded and things like that. It's going to go into a lot more, it's going to allow you to kind of pare the information down even into finer detail, which will be helpful, I think, for people like me who are nerds and want to know that kind of stuff. And then they also talked about the new etched accessory cases, which I have a whole video on. And but, you know, they did show some pictures of what they're, and this is some beautiful detail here, guys, but this kind of shows you the difference. You know, this is a just taped on the side accessory, but the new cases are going to be fully encased. I don't know if you can see that, but, you know, the actual accessories are going to be fully encased in like a square for each of the different figures and all the accessories they come with. And so those are 3 examples that they included in their newsletter. You know, I'm sure at some point I'm going to be purchasing on eBay in the near future a figure that has been graded with the new process and the new etched accessory cases. So when I do that, whenever that happens, a month from now, 2 months, 6 months from now, I'll do a video so you guys can see in actual color instead of a black and white piece of paper. Man, I've got to work on my production values. But you'll be able to see the differences in the cases. But just looking at the photos online of how they're going to be doing these etched accessory cases, I've already started seeing some of them pop up on eBay for people who have got the etched accessory cases, and this is only based on photos. But this opinion is only based on photos. But from what I can tell, they're still not as nice as the Collector's Archive Services cases. They don't look like they're molded inside those little inside the little squares that you see for example, this is Forlam or Zuckus, I don't know, whichever one you want to call them, but the holder for that gun doesn't look like it's molded. It's just like a hole that holds the gun. And I hope I'm wrong there. I hope I'm wrong, because the Collector's Archive Services cases are very, very nice. I have another whole video on that shows you some of my Luke Jedi Knight variants that have really cool etched accessory cases. So hopefully that's what they're doing, but just based on the photos, it does not look that way. It looks like they're just kind of little separate holders. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still an improvement versus what you see in front of you, but I'm hoping that it's etched and not just a little square holder for the accessories. So we shall see. Anyway, I'm sorry I ran kind of long, but I thought that was kind of useful information. But the biggest takeaway from this newsletter is that they're no longer doing uncirculated loose vintage Star Wars figures. As of October of 2018, they're all going to be just straight numbers, 85s, 80s, that kind of thing, and have no U on the sticker. Have a good weekend. Talk to you later.